Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Claire got married at 29 with the certainty that she was choosing the safest path. Gregory, her husband, also 29, was stable, balanced, a man of simple habits and calculated decisions. He was never the type of man who gave her chills or made her heart race, but he offered exactly what she was looking for: protection. From a very young age, Claire learned to see the world through the lens of necessity. She grew up in a home where the sound of an overdue electricity bill had more impact than any music. As a child, she would watch her mother hide letters from the bank in the kitchen cabinet, as if that would delay the pain that came afterward. At 12, she started washing neighbors' clothes to buy her own notebooks. And when she turned 18, she swore that one day she would be on the other side, the side where decisions aren't driven by the fear of lacking. Gregory entered her life as the living embodiment of that promise. The son of a wealthy family, he worked at a solid company and had a defined future. He liked to plan, liked security. And that made Claire feel like she was in the right place. She believed that, over time, she would learn to love him the way he deserved. But as the months went by, dinners became quieter, Sundays more repetitive. Gregory did everything right, followed the routine precisely, took care of her responsibly. But precisely because of that, everything began to lose color. Claire felt like she was living in a beautiful display window, where nothing could be touched, where every gesture was calculated, where even hugs came with the same tone of voice and the same interval between one and the next. She started to drift away little by little, without realizing it. She stopped laughing at his jokes, started sleeping with her back to him, responded with monosyllables during breakfast. And the saddest part was that Gregory noticed. He tried. He planned short trips for the two of them, bought flowers on random days, suggested new restaurants. Claire went along, smiled for photos, pretended to be excited, but inside she was just counting the minutes until it was over. She felt suffocated by comfort. The absence of problems had become a problem. Life had turned into a track, always straight, always the same. And her heart, which once was driven by the fear of losing everything, was now trapped in a place where nothing was lost, and also nothing was gained. One night, as she lay down, she stared at the ceiling for long minutes. Gregory was sleeping beside her, breathing rhythmically, one hand resting on his chest. Claire turned to her side and watched the outline of his face in the dim light. There was no disdain, no anger, not even guilt. What was there was a deep emptiness, the feeling of being next to someone who should have never been more than an acquaintance. She remembered an old moment, still in her teens, when she slept on her aunt's couch because her parents were fighting again. That night, she promised herself she would have a different life. And now that she did, she wondered if this was really what she wanted. The questions started coming more frequently. When she looked at Gregory, she didn't see a partner, but a structure. An insurance policy. A shield against everything she had already faced. But never love. She had no one to confide in because, in everyone's eyes, the marriage was perfect. Gregory was every woman's dream. And she would be crazy to say she felt like something was missing. She herself didn't know what it was. She only knew that she felt like something was missing. The following days went on as usual. He left early for work, she took care of household chores and small daily tasks. But inside, something had changed. She started avoiding certain moments, like sharing the couch, having lunch together, talking about the future. Gradually, she closed herself off, creating a space where she could breathe. It was a silence that Gregory didn't understand but respected. And that respect, which was supposed to keep them together, began to drive them further apart. At a lunch with her mother-in-law, Claire heard a phrase that stuck with her for days. The woman, proud of her son, said, "Gregory has always been a reliable man. He takes care of Claire the way a father would take care of a daughter." That bothered her. The idea of being protected, cared for, guided, it seemed nice, but it also took away her autonomy. Claire wanted more. She wanted to feel alive, desired, provoked. She wanted not to know exactly how tomorrow would be. She wanted to stumble, take risks, make choices that weren't based solely on logic or fear of the past. That week, while looking at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, she caught herself asking, "Do I deserve all this?" But the answer didn't come. The mirror only reflected the face of someone who seemed to have everything but, inside, felt like she was living someone else's life. And even without fully understanding why, it was there that Claire began to desire a mistake. Not just any mistake. But a mistake that would pull her out of that monotony, that would break the bubble, that would bring back the feeling of being alive. At that moment, Claire had no idea how far this desire would take her. Nor did she know the price she would pay to feel what she called freedom. All she wanted was to escape the feeling of being locked in a house too perfect to be real. And the first step toward that escape was closer than she imagined. The trip to the grocery store happened by chance. Claire had forgotten to buy some ingredients for dinner and decided to stop by quickly before Gregory arrived. It was one of those days when everything seemed out of place. She was distracted, walking through the aisles without much focus, until she suddenly turned and bumped into a man holding a bag of rice. She apologized, he smiled. An easy, confident smile. The kind of smile that captures attention effortlessly. Claire held back a laugh, fixed her hair, and tried to move on, but he struck up a conversation, made a silly joke about the organic food section, and she laughed. That laugh surprised her. Not because of the joke itself, but because it had been a while since she laughed naturally, without forcing an expression to keep up appearances. He introduced himself as Julian, told her he lived nearby and that this was the market he always frequented. Claire introduced herself with just her first name, without further explanation. They talked right there, in the cereal aisle. The conversation lasted over 15 minutes and flowed in a way she wasn't used to. There was none of Gregory's formality, nor that constant evaluative look that her husband's friends maintained. Julian looked her in the eye with genuine curiosity, as if trying to decipher her reactions. Before saying goodbye, he said he'd love to continue the conversation. She hesitated for 2 seconds but gave him her phone number. He saved it under the name, Claire from the market, and winked. During the ride home, she tried to understand what had just happened. It was just a conversation. But something about it had awakened her. Her phone vibrating a few hours later with a message from him only confirmed the feeling. "I hope you managed to make dinner. If you need help with recipes, I'm a great cook." Claire laughed to herself. She replied. And the exchange continued. Over the course of that week, they began talking every day. First about trivial things. Then, about more personal matters. Julian asked her what she liked to listen to, read, do when she was alone. Claire realized she was opening up in a way she didn't even do with Gregory. She avoided mentioning that she was married. She just said she had a complicated life, that she didn't feel as free as she would like. Julian, even without details, seemed to understand. One night, he sent an audio message saying, "You deserve more lightness. Sometimes, that's what we're missing to truly wake up." Claire listened to that audio lying next to Gregory, who was already asleep. On impulse, she got up and went to the living room to respond. She felt alive again, as if she were reliving a part of herself that had fallen asleep. Their first meeting happened a week later. She told Gregory she was visiting a friend and left. They agreed to meet at a discreet cafe, far from the places she usually frequented. He arrived early and had a red rose in his hands. Before going in, Claire, with a quick gesture, removed her wedding ring. She hid it in her makeup bag, like someone hiding something they don't want to remember. Then, seeing Julian's gesture, she smiled and held the flower as if it were something forbidden and precious. The conversation flowed naturally. He talked about a recent trip, a personal project, dreams he still wanted to fulfill. She vented about her routine, about days that seemed endlessly repeated. Julian listened to her with a kind of attention that enveloped her. In brief moments, he touched her arm, her shoulder, and each touch seemed to ignite something inside her. Claire felt she was crossing a boundary, but at the same time, she wanted to go further. When he said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek, longer than usual, she closed her eyes for a moment and wished that moment could last longer than the guilt itself. In the following days, their meetings became more frequent. Sometimes in parks. Other times in his car. Physical contact increased gradually. One day, he held her hand and kept it intertwined with his for a few minutes. Another day, she moved closer and rested her face on his shoulder. What started as a distraction became a refuge. Claire spent her mornings anxious for the afternoons when she would have an excuse ready to see him. And she began to rehearse lies easily. She said she was taking care of family matters, that she was tired, that she needed some time alone. Gregory never questioned. He remained the patient man he always was, and that, in a way, made everything even harder. A month later, Julian asked to know more about her real life. Claire took a deep breath and, for the first time, was honest. She said she was married, that she lived with her husband, that the marriage was in a state of silent wear and tear, without arguments, but also without life. Julian was silent for a few seconds, then responded calmly, "I won't lie, I'm surprised. But I like you. And I like the way you feel when you're with me. If we keep seeing each other, it will be by mutual choice. No pressure." Claire felt a strange relief. She expected judgment, received understanding. And that made her give in even more. Their meetings began to include kisses, long hugs, discreet caresses. Claire started getting dressed for Julian. She chose her clothes more carefully, put extra effort into her makeup, perfumed her wrists before leaving. She returned home with her heart racing and a confusing feeling in her chest. On one hand, she felt guilty. On the other, free. And it was this freedom that kept her trapped. She had created a new world just for herself, where she was desired, heard, provoked. And every time Julian looked at her with those curious and firm eyes, she believed more and more that she had made the right choice. Claire's phone became an extension of her desire. The messages came early in the morning, after lunch, before bed. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, when he said he dreamed about her. One night, she woke up and saw a message that said, "If I could, I'd come get you right now." Claire thought about replying, but instead just looked at the screen, with a faint smile. And, without realizing it, she began to wish that this secret world was the real one. What was supposed to be just a casual encounter outside of marriage soon became a secret routine that Claire began to desire more than anything else. Meetings with Julian became the fuel for her weeks. She woke up already thinking about when she could see him again. She invented appointments, adjusted schedules, changed routines. She started leaving the house in different clothes than the ones Gregory saw. She changed on the way, touched up her makeup in the car, prepared every detail as if she were a lovesick teenager. With every new afternoon spent with Julian, Claire felt her life gaining color again, even if it meant completely erasing everything she had built with Gregory. Julian was more spontaneous, more direct, had strong opinions, spoke with his hands, laughed loudly, complimented her ideas, her clothes, her perfume. When they were together, Claire forgot about everything else. The kisses became more intense, the touches bolder, and it stopped being just escapism. It was a new relationship, though disguised. On days they couldn't meet, they exchanged messages late into the night. Sometimes, she locked herself in the bathroom of her own house just to hear his voice for a few minutes. Her heart raced whenever she saw Julian's name on her phone screen. She started sleeping with the phone on silent, face down, afraid that a notification at the wrong time would destroy everything. Gregory, on the other hand, kept trying to keep the marriage afloat. He brought flowers, suggested weekend trips, bought different wines for them to try together. And Claire smiled, pretended to pay attention, but she was already absent. She avoided any kind of more intimate contact with her husband. She made excuses, said she was tired, that she needed space. Gregory began to feel, even without proof, that something had changed. He asked carefully, tried to talk, asked if something was wrong. Claire dodged, changed the subject. When he suggested couples therapy, she said it might be a good idea, but never scheduled it. Things began to spiral out of control when Julian had to move out of the house where he lived. He had a salary cut, accumulated debts, and temporarily moved back in with his parents. This complicated their meetings. Claire could no longer go to him. And Julian, frustrated, began pressuring her more. He wanted to see her more often, wanted to take more risks. That's when she made the definitive mistake. One afternoon when Gregory was away on a business trip, Claire brought Julian into the house she shared with her husband. It was like crossing an invisible border. She was nervous but excited by the transgression. He complimented the decor, explored the space as if it were an extension of their intimacy. They ended up in the couple's bed, breathless, laughing. And in the middle of the conversation, after getting dressed, Julian made jokes about Gregory. He called him Employee of the Month. Claire laughed. She said he was naive, that he would never suspect anything. And the two laughed as if they were mocking some random character. Claire carried on with her days as if nothing had happened. She felt increasingly confident. She no longer carried so much guilt, no longer trembled when lying. She began to think Gregory would never find out. Julian remained demanding, wanting more time, wanting plans. And she, torn between the safe world and the exciting one, began to believe she could sustain both. But the truth had already been captured. And what came next wouldn't be a conversation, or tears, or an apology. It would be the beginning of the end. In a way she never imagined. It was almost 8 o'clock in the evening when Claire heard the sound of the door opening. Gregory arrived as always, with the calm expression and relaxed posture of someone who seemed to have just had another ordinary day at work. She asked how his day was, he responded with a, "We need to talk." His tone was different. Claire tried to hide her discomfort, but his gaze was already heavy, direct. Gregory asked her to sit on the couch. He opened a recording app, searched for a file, and, without saying anything, pressed play. Her voice echoed through the room. It was clear. Her laughing with Julian. Her calling Gregory blind, easy to fool. Julian saying that idiot would never suspect anything. And then the two of them commenting on how it was almost fun. Claire froze. Her face went pale. What had been confidence turned to panic in seconds. She tried to grab the phone from his hand, but Gregory held it firmly. He didn't yell, didn't break anything. He just observed. When the recording ended, he stared at her for a few seconds and said firmly, "Now pack your bags. You're leaving today." She tried to say something, but he raised his hand, asking for silence. Only then did Claire realize that this moment was final. But what she didn't yet know was that all of this had been set up weeks ago. Gregory, despite his calm demeanor, had been suspicious for a while. The lame excuses, the distant looks, the different perfume she wore on certain days. The way she dropped her phone so quickly whenever he approached. The schedule changes, the effort to seem natural. He was never naive, just patient. And in silence, he began assembling his own puzzle. He bought 2 small digital recorders and discreetly installed them, one in the bedroom, the other in the living room. He programmed them to record for long periods. And waited. And then he got the recordings. Every laugh. Every humiliation. Gregory heard it all. But his decision was quick. Without hesitation, he took the audio files and sent them directly to Claire's parents, along with a brief message, "Maybe you'll want to hear this before asking me for help again." Parents who, for years, relied on his money to survive. It was Gregory who paid their rent. It was him who kept their health insurance, who covered basic expenses, who provided minimal stability for that family. And now, with a click, all of that began to crumble. The scene returns to the present. Claire is crying, saying she feels lost, that she doesn't know how this happened, that Julian was just a mistake. She tried to say the marriage could still be saved, that she was willing to change, to rebuild. She said it was a moment of weakness, that the routine suffocated her. She used all the words that came to mind, even though she didn't believe them. Gregory listened in silence. He got up from the couch and went to the hallway. He opened the bedroom door and said, "You have until tomorrow morning to leave. I'm going to sleep at my brother's house." She still tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away. Without aggression, without drama. Just with an empty look, like someone who had already given up trying to understand. The next morning, Claire packed her clothes into 2 suitcases. She avoided looking at the corners of the house. She knew every detail there carried the presence of a man who, for years, had been by her side without ever truly being loved. She called a rideshare and went to her parents' house. When she arrived, her mother greeted her with a look that mixed shock, shame, and anger. Her father didn't even leave his room. Claire knew that from that point on, everything would be different. And at that moment, still without understanding the depth of her fall, she realized she had destroyed everything with her own hands. Gregory came from a family with a strong surname, the kind that opens doors and also knows when to close them. He grew up surrounded by people who held important positions, company directors, business owners, influential friends who owed old favors to his father and to Gregory himself. He was a discreet man, but when he needed to act, he did so with precision. As soon as the scandal of the affair exploded, he made 2 calls. The first was to an acquaintance in the administrative area where Julian worked. The second, to an executive at a local retail chain that also hired third-party services, including Julian's. Within days, his name was placed on a list that circulated silently but effectively. And when Gregory called Julian directly and said simply, "In this city, you don't work anymore," the threat didn't seem exaggerated. It was a sentence. Julian still tried to keep his composure. He said Gregory was overreacting, that none of this needed to escalate to this extent. But the following days spoke for themselves. The contracts disappeared, the phone stopped ringing, former colleagues began avoiding him. Some pretended not to see him, others crossed the street. He went to interviews and heard evasive responses. When he asked why there was no follow-up, they said things like, "The profile isn't ideal," or "The position is filled." Julian understood quickly. He was marked. And Gregory made no secret of it. He was direct, cold, and calculated. His name became synonymous with trouble. With his reputation destroyed and without any support, Julian gathered his few belongings and decided to leave town. He didn't say goodbye. No message to Claire, no apology, no sign. He simply disappeared. He chose to vanish like a coward, without assuming any part of the responsibility. Claire found out about his departure through third parties. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Julian had been fired and left without saying where he was going. She didn't show an immediate reaction, but inside, she felt the impact. She thought that, at least, he would reach out, say something, show a minimum of consideration. But it didn't happen. And that hurt more than she expected. Because, until then, she still carried the idea that what she had lived with him was real. His escape put an end to even that illusion. Without support and with no one around, Claire left her parents' house after a few tense weeks. The accusations were constant. Her mother kept repeating that she had destroyed the only chance of stability the family had. Her father barely spoke to her. The monthly money Gregory deposited had been cut off, and with it came overdue bills, collection calls, the harsh reality. With what little remained, Claire rented a small studio apartment. Spartan, poorly furnished, but it represented a fresh start, even if surrounded by regret. She got a simple job at a stationery store. She served customers, organized shelves, managed inventory. She walked to work every day, unhurried, like someone still trying to understand what she had done with her life. Her designer clothes were replaced by basic pieces. Her hair, always styled before, now stayed tied up. Makeup became a rare item, reserved for special occasions that never came. She avoided mirrors for long periods. Not out of vanity, but because she didn't want to face what she had become. Claire was organizing some materials at the counter when she heard the doorbell ring. She glanced quickly and saw a woman entering. She had a firm posture, discreet glasses, and a folder under her arm. Just another customer, until Claire recognized the face. Her body froze for a second. It was Samantha, Gregory's sister. They stared at each other. Samantha recognized her too. She didn't seem surprised, just observed for a moment, without changing her expression. She walked to the counter and placed a few items there. Claire, unsure how to react, just scanned the products, trying to maintain her composure. But the silence between them was heavy, full of everything that didn't need to be said. Samantha took out her wallet, paid with her card, and before leaving, said simply, "He's fine. But he's changed." Claire stood frozen. She hadn't expected this visit. Or this line. She stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to figure out if it was a provocation, an update, or just a truth tossed there. Before she could stop herself, she let the question slip. "Does he hate me?" Samantha hesitated. She looked at her firmly and replied, "He said he forgives you. But forgiveness doesn't require coexistence." The words hit Claire dryly, directly. There was no resentment in Samantha's voice. Just a fact. Claire just nodded, and Samantha left without looking back. She finished serving the next customer without saying a word. As soon as the flow of customers slowed down, she went to the back of the store and sat alone, leaning against the cold wall. The tears came effortlessly. But they weren't the same ones she had cried months ago. These were quieter. A kind of cry that comes when the truth finally finds its place within someone. Because, in that moment, Claire understood that the forgiveness she never expected had come, and that, by itself, was more powerful than any return. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.